We're not doing a usual intro on this one. We're gonna get straight into it because the community asked for it. There's been some back and forth about the accusations of Eureka Entertainment of using somebody's fan restoration for the release of Swordsman of All Swordsmen, which includes the mystery of chess boxing. And the people behind the the film that was loaned to Eureka, I met these individuals, and I got to see this print 3 times, like I told you, Peter.
Yeah.
And I find it kind of wild that Eureka, would allegedly would do something like this because I know how passionate they are, and it will make no sense to credit Dan Patel. Probably said his name wrong.
Dan Halstead.
Yeah, how's the wow? I'm thinking of other people. I've been working all day. We're putting this video together. I'm thinking somebody else, but yeah, it wouldn't make any sense to me. But again, things do happen.
Yeah, some things
Especially in the
slip through the
entertainment industry.
cracks, so
Yeah, and I mean, you have experience with this individual because this is the first time I heard of them.
yeah, now I didn't know there was a fan restoration of Mystery of Chess Boxing, but I've seen their restorations of Hell's Windstaff and The Victim. And typically speaking, they do pretty good work. I guess in a way you could say this is similar to Hong Kong Rescue, but in that this particular individual always encouraged people to get official releases and has even stopped selling their products because
Right.
some of these films are now getting these releases. So, you know, it's definitely something that was born of passion and a desire for these films to be seen. So I can understand why when they first saw Eureka's restoration from our video, possibly that they jumped to the conclusion that Eureka jacked my freaking file. They do look similar, but there's enough differentiating factors that we've determined that it's not the same restoration.
Right. And we said we spoke about it. We're not gonna do this video. I was being, hot headed and everything, but after I thought about it and 24 hours has passed by, I was like, you know what, the community is asking for it. And we're gonna do this comparison video because one thing you guys should know is that the only known existing print of this film is RZA's copy, where Dan scanned it for him and it was streamed for the first time in 2020 during the pandemic when they had a website called 36 Cinema. There was live commentary with the RZA. And when I remember from that website, because I saw the Sword of Doom there when Michael Jai White did commentary, believe it or not, they had a VOD service. Like you didn't catch the stream, you was able to, watch it later. So my assumption, because there was no available print of this film nowhere, especially with this aspect ratio, this individual just ripped the stream.
Yeah.
So, that's why they look similar. Now with that said, we're gonna show you guys why Eureka's print is not his fan restoration. You're gonna see some differences, and I'm gonna get this out of the way. And me and both Peter agree, which makes no sense. This guy's contrast we actually like better than Eureka's.
Yeah, and I mean the shots we've picked definitely favor the Eureka one just for this comparison's sake to show differences. But there are actually certain aspects of this fan restoration that I think are better looking than the official version available now.
Right, because when I saw it in the theater, again, this thing is the only one we know of that the RZA owns. It's not the negative, it's a real. So that thing got banged up and everything throughout the years.
Yeah, there's only so
So
much
yeah,
restoration you can do with a scanned reel versus having the negative.
exactly. I mean, you mentioned to me earlier with the negative, you could do the color correction and a
Yeah,
whole
you
bunch of
could
other stuff.
wildly change the color because if you were to take it from the reel, it's already got like those greens and blues and yellows or whatever, so those would be warped versus you completely replacing them.
Yeah, and it would take a lot of work to like hook something from a reel, from my understanding, from people that I spoke to. Now, I mean, you got some samples to show, but first, one of the things that I noticed right away, and are we going to talk about the grain right now?
Yeah, yeah. We're gonna start with, because you said you wanted to give some examples of what grain looks like on film. So we're gonna start with
Real
some
grain
shots from
compared to applied software grain.
yeah, yeah. So we're gonna start with some shots from Killer's Mission here. Now, as you can see, this is a pretty dark scene overall. There's some golds in here, and the guy wearing the black kimono there kind of blends in with the background. So if I zoom up on his head, you can see in the back where his hair is, there's the specular highlights from the lighting, but then the grain naturally resolves behind him. There's delineation between his head and the darkness. And that's how grain should look when it's not been digitally altered.
Yeah, you're not gonna see like massive gaps. Think of grain like snowflake patterns when you super zoom in, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't even super, super zoomed in, but you can clearly see there is grain there.
Right. And you don't see no crazy gaps where the grain just stops.
No, not even on his face, if I were to zoom in that. It looks all very consistent.
And also, the color matching, all that stuff. And because usually when you zoom out in dark scenes with grain, you see like different color patterns of the colors that's being shown. And sometimes dark ones seem a little whitish or a little bit of greenish, depending on the film print. But yeah, that's how real grain looks like.
Yeah, you can even see it in this second shot here, where the shogunate with his sort of grayish kimono on, like the grain in the background. Again, I'll just do a shot near the door here. You can see the dark lines from the paper wall, and it's all very consistent. It, as Frankie said, looks like a snowflake pattern or snowdrops.
And
And
also, even when the color starts blending in, it has like this soft look to it,
yeah,
when it comes to grain.
and there's clear patterns here of I wouldn't say color banding, but like it's falling off in a natural way. Like the grain starts to get greenish as it blends into the brown from the wall, things like that. Those are clear signs of natural grain. Now, here's a photo of some random model Frankie pulled up. But again, if we zoom in on her hair here, you can see there's a natural resolve of the grain. While some of the finer detail is maybe lost because of its transition to digital, everything is consistent with itself. There's a, maybe a touch blotching of the grain here because the picture itself isn't super high resolution, but it still looks natural. This isn't digitally added grain or anything like that.
And yeah, look at the outline on her skin, how it transitions to the background, like the different, the way the color, fades out, which is consistent also with the previous picture sample from the killer's mission.
And so this is our first shot of the fan restoration of Mystery of Chess Boxing. I picked this one because there's an issue on this film reel where the subtitles just kind of screw up. So you see this gigantic white box and it looks horrible. But if we zoom in on that box itself, you'll notice that some of the luminance has kind of gone away. Yeah, it's almost as if this has been digitally touched up. And that's the first sign that we knew something was up here. And then if we go over to this lady sitting in the chair here, you can see there's like a grain pattern on her head, but it's not consistent with the hair. It's kind of, like I said, digitally added. Even the background behind her where you can see the plant and whatnot. The one thing that this fan restoration does have, though, is that it's pretty sharp. There seems to be some digital sharpening going on. As I zoom up on this guy's face, too, you can see there's a decent amount of detail, and even the painting in the background looks
Which is
pretty
not a
sharp.
bad thing. The sharpening is actually not that bad. The
Yeah,
way it was
it
used.
looks pretty good here. But then when we go to Eureka's version, first off, the big differentiating factor is that it's in the proper aspect ratio. You may not have even noticed it, but the fan restoration is slightly squished, so it's actually window boxed. And we're guessing that has to do from being ripped from a stream. So they captured the window of their monitor and didn't stretch it out all the way.
To give some people context one more time is RZA streamed this in the summer of 2020. This fan restoration came out a year later in 2021.
Yes. But then if we go back to the subtitle box here, you'll see on Eureka's it's a lot whiter. Definitely looks much, much brighter. And that's going to be from the luminance of the film reel, since light has to pass through to obviously project it. Then when we go over to this lady, you see that there's some grain detail, but I mean, this print's obviously of degraded quality, but it's absolutely not consistent with the way that the fan restoration looks. This is a totally different grain resolve. The background plant is less visible, I suppose, in a way, and there's not as much splotchiness in the grain behind her. And even on this guy's face here, it looks softer. The picture in the background doesn't appear as vibrant in a way, but those are all because there's no digital sharpening on this.
Now, here's the thing I'm going to add. In order to remove digital film grain, let's say if Eureka did take this, they had to go frame by frame and smudge all that out.
Yeah.
Unless they had my man's original data file, his workflow, whatever programs he used.
Which at that point, that wouldn't make sense because they would have had the original film reel.
Yeah, and one more time, Dan is the person who scanned the 35 from the RZA.
So in this next shot too, we see Jack Long in the darkness, and I picked this because this is a great example of where on the fan restoration, maybe some of the DNR went a touch too far. I mean, it looks fine from a distance, and the sharpening is actually pretty decent on his face. But if you zoom in, then it starts to look a little waxy, and Jack Long's definitely seen better days here. But specifically, the grain in the background of the darkness is out of control. Yeah, it doesn't look like snowfall. It looks like a friggin' blizzard. And that is definitely digital grain. Yeah, that's not how grain looks on a film reel.
Usually when dark scenes, you get something called noise. You see the dots, the green little dots.
Yeah, and that's very evident here. And one thing to note too, there's these pillars on the bottom left. When I go to the Eureka version right now, you'll notice they kind of shift a little because, again, the aspect ratio is slightly squished on the fan restoration. But yeah, going back to Jack Long's face, I mean, I can't say that the Eureka version looks phenomenal here, but it's definitely better because it's the raw presentation of that. You know, whatever grain is left from the damaged print, it's still here. It's not been digitally manipulated. And while the grain in the blacks here is still maybe a little out of control, that's just because it's dark. And while Eureka's bitrate is relatively high, it's still not necessarily enough to kind of mask that grain better. This would require a proper restoration, which we're likely not going to ever get because the negative is just gone. Now in our final shot, this is from earlier in the movie when the villain, Ghostface Killer, confronts whoever the heck this guy is. I kind of forgot his name. But on the fan restoration, the thing that stuck out to us the most, surprisingly, were these rocks. This is a very clear sign where digital sharpening was used. Like, it looks pleasing enough, and there is seemingly detail in the background that is not on the Eureka version. But again, that's sort of an AI upscaling effect where it's adding detail that wasn't necessarily there. There's this extra weathering pattern on the bigger rock in the right, whereas if we go to the Eureka, you'll see that it's definitely a little blurrier, but there's no unnatural grain added, and none of that digital sharpening ruins the image further.
Yeah, because the Eureka one gives it the effect like a depth of field almost, you know?
Yeah, I
But
actually
regardless,
would agree with that.
Yeah, but the fan restoration, when you watch it on your TV, it looks damn good with this, with a sharpening tool. But for me, it's just it didn't seem right. You saw what I saw right away. You didn't even freaking name the pictures when you sent it to me. I'm like, wait a minute, let me see something. Let me zoom in. And he was like, oh, like wait. And I noticed the hair right away because the grain was too big. I'm like, this was like digital grain. I remember this film having, from the one I saw it, having that type of grain on it. And I saw this film 3 times.
Yeah, and I want to make it certain right here is that we're not doing this video to malign the person or insult them or send negativity their way. It's just because this became an issue, we wanted to get to the bottom of it to make sure that Eureka wasn't. I mean, who knows? Maybe Eureka did steal it, but from what we can tell, that's not the case.
Like, yeah, why would Eureka
Yeah, there's
take this guy's job? That look, if you show it to an intermediate person, a person who's not into the tech stuff, mind you, we had to zoom in to show you this stuff.
yeah.
Why would it take something that's good and make it worse?
Yeah, that's and again, because of all this digital sharpening and added grain or whatever, for Eureka to then use that same file and remove it would be so much more extra work than just scanning the 35 millimeter and calling it a day, which is what they did.
I mean, Eureka kept it pure as possible. And again, when we were looking at the pictures, like, I don't know, I prefer this guy's version. I'm like, dude, this digital grain is annoying me.
Yeah, it does get annoying the more you look at it, but as you said, in motion, it's really not
Yeah, it's
that
not
noticeable.
distracting.
And I could see some people preferring the fan restoration.
And I don't blame him because it's sharp.
Yeah, and the contrast on Eureka's is slightly boosted, but the contrast on this fan restoration it makes everything pop. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say Eureka stole it because yours possibly looks better.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, so yo, fam, like, they didn't take your stuff, man. They actually used the banged up print and you actually put some effort into what you was doing.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't go in this with bias. We went in there and I was like, yo, the way he did the contrast level is the way I would do it. Or when I edit my photos, I like to, mess with the contrast to give it that extra pop. And the only thing I didn't agree with was the added grain. That's it.
Yeah.
And the sharpening at times, But again, this print is not that perfect. So it comes with preference. But this is definitely not a fan restoration at all. Because
Yeah.
they had to go frame by frame to remove that grain.
Yeah, and that just
And then it will probably look even smudgier.
yeah, it would be a blurry mess like they put Vaseline over the screen. So it's definitely not what happened here. You could tell from the luminance levels alone too.
Right. Like, for me, I was like, oh, wow. Because I glanced at it that day with the title screen and then I realized the company logo, because I shared it with a few people. That's probably from another, Joseph Quo film, which is super sharp. And both of them are even different.
Yeah, yeah. But regardless, that's the extent of this. We didn't. I don't know. I actually don't know how to end the video.
Say, at the end of the day, Eureka didn't use this, and the man he does some good, he does some good work, but Eureka didn't jack your stuff, brother, But with that said, man, I hope you guys found this video informative. The lady that I show you guys, if y'all could reverse Google image search and tell me who that is, because I looked at somebody's random portfolio on Pinterest and there was no name. Let a brother know. Put it down in the comments. Yo, until the next one. Peace.